Well, Sam Osipow, it is just a pleasure to get a chance to talk with you. Um, I, I'm so eager to hear your perspectives about how you founded the journal, what your goals were, and here we are 50 years later. So I'd love your thoughts on the Journal of Vocational Behavior and what you'd hoped when you started it, what it was like to start a journal in 1971, and I'd just love your thoughts. Welcome.
At the time I got the idea to start the journal, there were relatively few outlets for vocational studies to be published. And it occurred to me that we could use another outlet. And so I suggested it to the publisher, who was at that time, it was Academic Press, I think.
Right.
And they liked the idea. So I wasn't thinking about being the editor at that time, but since they decided, since it was my idea, they decided to make me the editor. So that first issue was put together with love, and we went for 4, 5, 6 years, I don't remember, before the next editor. I think Lenore Harmon was next.
Lenore Harmon, right.
She did a good job, and I've kind of lost track after Lenore.
Nancy
Nancy was
Beth.
next, right? After Nancy,
Tony Tinsley.
who?
Tony Tinsley.
Tinsley, where my memory is not so good.
That's okay. And then Mark Savickas for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what were your hopes as you started the journal?
My hope was that it'd be a good place to publish our studies in the vocational area, and I never thought about it lasting 50 years. I was hoping it would last at least 2 or 3 years. But apparently it's developed a life of its own.
Yeah.
There were relatively few subscribers in the beginning. I don't know how it's doing now, but the last 50 years, there must be a few people who subscribe.
Yeah, quite a few. And how many people did you have on the editorial board? And Tanya, maybe we'll ask what the number of subscribers is now. I couldn't even tell you.
I could actually have a copy of the first issue.
Oh, let's see it.
Got to get up and get it. No. Did you reach the first issue of the red ones? My son is helping me out here.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, that's it. Okay, who was on the board? I'm getting there. Oh yeah, yeah. It was Bob Campbell. You know Bob Campbell. Jack Kreitz, Peter Dawes, whom I don't think I ever actually met, but he was recommended. Robert Dubin, Milt Hockel, who was an Ohio State person, Lenore, Dave Hershenson, John Holland, Abe Corman, Joseph Kuntz, Lloyd Lofquist, Ed Marks, Donald Super, and Donald Zaitowski.
Wow. So Sam, talk about how that all was. You had to recruit members of the editorial board. You had to solicit manuscripts, right? How long was it before manuscripts started to come in?
It wasn't too long. In the beginning, the first few issues, I had to invite people to write, but there were plenty of people who wanted to do that. And so after the first 2 or so issues, there was no shortage of manuscripts being submitted. I followed the procedures that were set up for the journal counseling psych, getting reviewers and asking them, giving them some instruction about how to do it. And it was really a labor of love for me for those years.
And you you called it the Journal of Vocational Behavior. You didn't call it the Journal of Vocational Psychology. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Right. We had a little disagreement about what to call it, and I wanted to make it a little broader than just psychology. So that's why I preferred to use behavior. And
Okay.
there was a little discussion, but nobody gave me a hard time about it.
Well, one of the, I think one of the challenges continues to be integrating across IO and vocational psychology.
Right.
And so that suggests, can you talk a little bit about what your goal was even at that time? In terms of those two areas, what Mark called the two islands?
I was pretty sure we would get some from both areas, and I wanted to be sure we included a wider area than just vocational psychology, which is what was implied by behavior.
Right,
We got some IO type articles submitted.
all right. So you are well known for being a huge proponent and mentor to women in vocational psychology. And yet when you just read all those names, they're all men, right? Except for Lenore.
I got a little bit of instruction after that
Yeah.
about adding women to the board. No, remember, we're talking about 1970 or so.
Right, right.
There was not a lot of support for women in this area.
Yeah,
I believe the first woman I added to the board was Lenore.
right. Yeah, you just read her name.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
And
Nancy was also an early bird. But as time went on, there were more and more women who wanted to publish in this area, so that stopped being a problem. And in the later issues, there were more women on the editorial board, and
right,
also reach out to women who weren't on the board to get them to review papers and submit papers both.
right.
So if you're looking at that board and the original board, it was it's a little embarrassing to look back on that 50 years later.
Lenore and Nancy both credit you tremendously with encouragement and mentorship in their careers. So
Well,
that turned around pretty quickly for you.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
I just said they really strongly are appreciative of your mentorship for their careers.
Yes.
And not only as editor, but just in general in their careers.
I've had a few students who've kept in touch with me over the years, and they valued my support.
Yeah, yeah. So what were other than starting a journal, can you remember challenges in your editorship, which lasted until when? When did Lenore take over?
I think I did the first six volumes. So that would have been
Okay,
like 76 or 77, and she took
okay,
over. And she was recommended by Robert Campbell, who knew her. They were both at Minnesota, because at that
right,
time. And then from then, there was never much problem getting women on the board.
right. And now we're 48% actually.
Is that what it is now?
Yeah, of about 160 members of the editorial board.
That's pretty big.
Yeah, it is. And international, it's very international now.
It was moving in that direction. I know when Lenore took over, and yes, I haven't. I was how many years? It's probably 40 or more years since I was the editor. A lot has changed since then, and I've not kept up with it really.
Yeah,
And I've been retired for over 20 years now.
yeah, yeah.
So I'm kind of out of it. So it was a pleasant surprise to get somebody. Well, I guess I'll put it this way: I haven't been totally forgotten. I guess.
Oh gosh, no. I said to Tanya that I was probably going to be starstruck to get a chance to get to talk to you. And because it's been, I think you probably don't realize how many people you mentor from afar. Itamar Gatti wrote, or
Elfman Mayer.
yeah, another Israeli scholar talked about how you met him at the airport. Was it
That
Gatti
was
or?
Ozzy Barak.
Yeah, right. And and I've always thought of how generous that is for an international student coming over to meet them and take them, welcome them in that way. My own father was came from Egypt to study here, get his PhD here, and so I grew up with somebody who really welcomed international students, but he never went and met somebody at the airport. And I've thought often what a marvelous way that is to mentor and be a support to students.
Well, two things about Ozzy. First of all, uh, I taught at Tel Aviv University for 14 months, and he was my assistant. Since I didn't speak Hebrew, uh, there was some need for translation here and there.
Yeah,
So I got to know him very well, and I encouraged him to come to Ohio State. So I felt some responsibility for
right,
his well-being. Uh, in addition, uh, my wife and I, during that same period of time, were part of a group at Ohio State in psychology anyway, who mentored, I guess is the best word, foreign students.
right,
We would meet them at the airport. We would help them find a place to live and get them settled in. And these were not all psychology students. They were from various disciplines. So we were tuned into the notion that people need help when they come to a new place.
right,
And
yeah,
I've since learned that myself. We spent a little time in New Zealand, in Australia, and we were treated very nicely by our hosts. And
yeah,
so it kind of goes around, what goes around comes around, I guess.
absolutely right. And your work in career decision making still is seminal in the field. So
I'm sorry,
no,
I
you're
can't.
not forgotten, Miss Dr. Osipow.
Well, I've gotten pretty old, and uh, one of my former students she was Joyce Elfelder Kay.
Oh yeah, right.
Joyce was at Penn State, where I started actually, and she was bringing a bunch of students to a meeting here at Ohio State. And when told them she wanted to take an afternoon off and look me up again, they said, "Is she still alive?" And I thought, good grief, that I knew I was old.
Well, it is just such a great pleasure to get a chance to talk with you. Anything else you want to say about the journal? Here it is 50 years later. It's quite a
Uh,
legacy, Sam.
I am impressed as I think about how long it's gone. I mean, who thinks about 50 years ahead when
Yeah,
they start something?
right.
I certainly didn't. Uh,
Well,
and
and I think about, I think we have 160 members on the editorial board. We're right today at about almost 800 submissions for the year, which means we'll be pretty healthy. It's, our rejection rate is about 93%. So it's really an
really,
outlet of choice for a lot of people. Yeah, I think there's some positive part of that people get good feedback from the editorial board. And the anniversary issue, I'm very excited about because we're really trying to bridge those two areas. Jeff Greenhouse talked to me when I became editor about, and I bet this came from you, that the dependent variable in this journal is at the individual level. And that's a really strong mantra to me, that there are questions we have about work and the influence of work and the outcomes of work at the individual level, regardless of the setting, of whether it's making a choice or living with a choice or making a different choice or so on and so forth. So we've really challenged the authors to try to integrate across the two areas. And so I'm excited to I'm excited to see your perspective on that when you get a chance to read those articles.
I think it's a good direction for the journal to move. I don't recall making any particular effort to do that when I was an editor, but I can not remember a lot of things that.
Well, fair enough. It's 50 years ago, right?
Yeah. I don't think I've ever met you in person, have I?
No, you haven't. You haven't. That's why I said I'm a little starstruck to get a chance to talk with you.
Well, you you're still doing the editorial job, right?
Yes, I am. One more year.
One more year. Who was the editor before you?
Mark Savickas.
Mark. Oh, so that does bring it pretty close to, yeah, okay. Mark. Tony was before him, I think.
Right. And then Nancy, Lenore, and then you.
Yeah. Well, that's a nice line of a nice lineage, and you've done a good job, I'm sure.
Thank you.
I am pleased to have finally have a face to go with the name. And
Well, go ahead.
you just the invitation to talk to you came at a good time because I've had some health problems lately, and it helps take my mind off some of those issues.
Well, I'm glad we could play that role. I wish you the very, very best.
I thank you, and I wish you the same.
Thank you.
Forward to hearing or to getting a copy of the anniversary issue.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So take good care. Thank you.
Wear a mask.
Exactly. Be well.
You too. Thanks for talking to me.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for talking to us.
My pleasure.